Greetings everybody, Brother Dan Goodman here. This is the God's Final Jubilee program. We're glad that you stopped by. I've got a special guest with me. As you can see, something's different tonight, right? I'm not in my studio, as you can obviously see, because I certainly wouldn't have that ugly olive green background in my studio. And I wouldn't have this dude in my studio either. But I'm sitting here in Oklahoma City. Most of you know I'm the host here out at Prosody News, and I come out here about once a month. And I get to interview, I get not only to choose the guest, but I get to interview him here at the hotel. And so this is my good friend from way back, Pastor Jerry Ross. Brother Jerry, good to be here. Good to be here. You say that now. You might not say that in a few minutes. And by the way, what you see here, you'll see on Prosody News when we record. I'm the same right here as I will be on television. On I tell jokes. I say crazy stuff, and I tell people what you see is what you get. There's nothing fake about it. You may not like me, but there's nothing fake about me. So we're going to talk just a few minutes about Brother Jerry's brand new book. It's called "Did God Put a Book Inside of You?" And I have read this book, almost every page. I skimmed a couple things, but I read almost the whole book. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. And but before we do that, let me tell the folks who you are. You're Jerry Ross, pastor in Jasonville, Indiana. You took over your dad's church.
My dad started the church. We just celebrated our 46th anniversary back in 1973. Started in a guy's living room with a handful of people, and he pastored for over 40 years. He's in heaven now, but yes, I worked under him for 11 years and then have been pastoring the church for about 15 years.
I think I met your dad. I think I preached for you one time when your dad was still there.
He's still alive, probably right.
I don't know if I preached after that or not. I think I've preached. I know I preached there once, maybe twice.
Yes, twice I think. Yeah.
And I got to meet your dad, and what a blessing.
Yeah.
I think you're the one that told me years ago, and this was before I was really heavy in prophecy. I think you made the statement that in the 60s and 70s, the church prophecies what built the churches.
Well, we're looking back now, and you know, people that are Baptist historian, Bible historian, church historians could speak to this. That's not me, but I've heard guys even use, looking at what happened in the late 50s through early 80s. I've heard the phrase third great awakening, and there was some amazing and unusual things that happened. Very much a moving of God in the United States of America, and a lot of the fuel that drove that was prophecy conferences. Yeah. I mean, back in those days.
The late Great Planet Earth book come out, had Lindsay,
that's right.
Jack Van Impe was getting big then. And
that movie, and again, if you go back and look at it now, you laugh through it, but A Thief in the Night.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, people.
My wife saw that as a teenager.
Yeah. Churches would rent out National Guard armories, and I mean, they'd pack them out showing that movie, and I mean, you know, not something that probably, you know, I would sign off on everything now, but I'm telling you, it stirred something in our nation. There was an expectation of Christ's return amongst God's people. And you think there's two doctrines that have traditionally brought people under conviction if they're lost and to the Savior, and also stirred Christians at the same time. And that's the doctrine of hell and the doctrine of the second coming.
Wow.
And think about how those two doctrines have now disappeared from the pulpits in America.
And I just had a guy on Prosody News, Pastor Sheldon. He wrote a book called The Terror of the Lord. We did 2 interviews at Prosody News, and I'm telling you, they were powerful.
Wow.
He's a nobody. Nobody ever heard of him until I brought him on. And I'm telling you, that book it was powerful.
Awesome.
And that's what he talks about. Preachers are all preaching the love of God, and the love of God's wonderful, the grace of God, but he said that's all people are hearing anymore. There's no more preaching about the wrath and the judgment and all that. So yeah, good stuff. Isn't it amazing what you said there, how we've changed? The Left Behind movie, well, that wasn't the name, The Thief in the Night movie.
Right.
People would laugh at that today because it wasn't well done. I mean, it wasn't the modern technology we have today, and
you're right.
People would laugh at that. And I'm not sure. I think the Left Behind stuff that comes out today on TV and on books, I think a lot of people look at it as just a novel or something, or entertainment anymore. It's not. Nobody even thinks.
Well, I was really hoping, because when all of those books came, I can remember walking into Books A Million in Terrewood, Indiana, and I walked over, and the first 5 best-selling non-fiction books were the first 5 of that series.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure. I haven't read them. Guys that have told me that there's some things that they would not agree with. But what did excite me was, hey, maybe we're going into another time frame where people's interest is being piqued concerning the second coming. But I think you're right. I think people begin to look at it as just a novelty, entertainment value, and not really, because back in the 70s, it stirred the heart. Right?
But I didn't meet Tim LaHaye. He's the left behind them. He's not really the writer though. And I've lost the guy's name. Jenkins. And my daughter and I met him. We were at a little conference, only like 20 people there. We got to meet him, shake his hand.
Oh wow.
And chat with him a little bit. My daughter's kind of in the Civil War stuff. She's kind of becoming an author, but and I'm just a lousy author. But anyway,
that's not.
We got to meet him. He was the writer behind those books, I think. And Tim LaHaye was the doctrinal guy.
Yes.
And there's a few things that I don't see the way Tim LaHaye did, but I think they were good, and I think they made people think.
Again, just anything that gets people to take a pause and say, because they may get a book like that, and again, but if it piques their interest, then they start searching and they find programs like this, and we need this doctrine to be the tip of the spear. If we're going to turn the nation, we need to have people's heart move back to the idea of Christ's return. So.
Now, you and I met. I went to Bible college in 1983, I believe.
Okay.
You were already there.
I came in 79.
You were there a long time.
79, and I left in 86.
Okay, I was there longer. I should say I was there 8 years.
Oh yes.
And I graduated.
Yes, I did too.
Okay.
And the college we went to, they did not design that college for you to be done in 4 years.
Well, not with all the stuff they expected of us.
That was yes.
They gave a whole weekend.
That's exactly right. I mean, and you know what? I'm glad for it, because it was the book learning stuff and the classes and all of that. You've got the theory, and then on the weekends they saw to it that we put it into practice. And
now you were one of my heroes.
Well,
when I was there.
You must have just
had somebody,
a limited view of.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one, but you were one of the guys I looked up to.
Well,
probably more so than some of the staff members.
I think you came in, like 3 or 4 years after me, and I would say that would be true of the upperclassmen when I came in. One of the things my dad told me when I went to Bible college, and so many wise things, my dad, but he said, Jerry, don't let circumstances choose your friends. He said, you're probably going to be put in a room with a bunch of freshmen, and that's fine. But he said, you look at some of the older students that are serious-minded, they're heading in a direction, they've got a passion for Christ, and you go hook up with those guys. And, that's what I did. And then I also remember that later on, that when I became an upperclassman, my last few years, I felt a responsibility. And that, there has to be that leadership even within the student body. So, I got to credit my dad and his good wisdom guiding me in that direction. So.
Well, just a few things I remember vividly. Of course, the night bus. It was the heart of many years there for us.
Yes, it was.
It wasn't for everybody, but for us, the night bus. Some of you don't know what in the world we're talking. What's a night bus? It's something you go down the corner on First Avenue and you get this bus that runs all night. It was the church bus that we ran in the evenings, and we picked up kids on Sunday morning, brought them to church, 45 minutes to church, one way on a bus, and took them back to Chicago. Then we'd hang around, and then we'd do it again. That was the heart.
Adults and the teenagers, and really the more serious-minded, the ones we were discipling, we would pick them up.
Yeah, we didn't bring the gangs and all that on Sunday night. That was Sunday morning.
Sunday morning was like throw the net as wide as you can, and whatever you can bring in, hope the gospel has an effect. But the Sunday night crowd it was a different flavor, and those folks, I mean, you think of what they've already done to go there in the morning, and then to climb back on that bus and not get delivered to their house till 11, 12 at night after the service. And
each week, a different bus captain, we were all bus captains. Each week, a different one of us, it was our turn to preach on that night bus. I still have sermons that I preached on that night bus that I feel were some of the best sermons that I ever heard.
Amen. And I've heard some of the worst sermons I've ever heard on that night.
Well, you heard some of mine too.
No, we kid around, but we always say more heresy was preached on it.
I remember Jeff Engstrom, he moved me.
Oh, he moved me when I was always excited when Jim Beller preached. I was always excited when Jeff Ingstrom preach, Brother Moore, I love to hear him preach. And the other guys, we didn't have a bad preacher. You know, the other guys were great, but there's always those ones that, I don't know, you resonated with for some reason, you know. So.
And I'll never forget, I remember you talking about, these are just some of the memories I had, and we'll get into your book here, but I remember you talking about walking down the street at night on your bus route, looking at the houses, and talking about people behind those doors. I never forgot that. Yeah. You had a heart.
I preached a message on the night bus called the Call of the Unknocked Door, and how sometimes I try to just walk by them, and you know, it's hard to understand. I'm from Jasonville, Indiana, 1,500 people, very rural. And then I'm transported into this mass of people, and in one block, you know, I thought this, have you ever tried to estimate how many people would have lived in one block and how many doors would it take? Because you're talking about buildings 3 to 4 stories high.
Or more.
Front and back entrances, apartments, and that's just, and they're right. And so, you know, as much time as we did spend, and we spent a lot of time, it was hard to get all the doors, and I remember preaching that message and talking about how I'd be heading to the prayer meeting and I knew it was time we had to quit. But as I'm passing some doors that I've never hit before, I think about, okay, who's on the other side? Yeah. And here I haven't got to them yet, you know.
Well, there's 100 memories that we could reminisce about, but let's get into your book.
Yes.
This is brand new. Now, you've written a bunch of books. This one, I think, is brand new, or almost brand new.
It is, within the last year or so.
Okay, and this is called, I didn't know about this till recently, this is called, Did God Put a Book Inside of You? And your goal, from what I understand, you're trying to inspire people to write.
Yes, yes, and you know, when I go out and preach, or I have preachers come in, one of the first questions, I mean, this is personal with me, I'm recruiting guys to write, because guys, especially in our age category, you know what, they need to now stop and start putting some things down. So a lot of guys, almost every guy, and it's not just preachers, this is something that God can use ladies to do, and we need some of our pastors' wives writing, because ladies read more.
And you got a book written by you and your wife.
And my wife, yes.
And I asked you to bring her and you wouldn't.
I wouldn't, no.
And so that door is still open, that invitation is still open.
Hey, I'll tell you right now, if you could ever get my wife in front of a camera.
I know what it was.
Then
you figured she'd get on television and they wouldn't want you, they'd want her to come.
I'd be sitting over in the corner. That's exactly what would happen. So. My wife and your wife would take this couch over and they wouldn't even remember us anymore.
In a few minutes, I'm going to share something from this book that's going to revolutionize some of you preachers and some of you others out there, and make you realize, yes, I can write a book. And I dog-eared some stuff here.
Good.
Stuff that I know I've already been doing, but I didn't understand what I was doing, that I'm doing exactly what you said in here. And I've written probably 12 books. I don't even know how many books I've written, but this would have helped me a while back. Why didn't you tell me this earlier?
Well, and this is what the purpose.
You know what I'm talking about? The outline. The outline.
Oh yes. Well,
that's life-changing right there.
The reason I put that is I kept mentoring guys through the process. I finally told my wife, and Shelton Smith had asked me to go to the Sword of the Lord conference and speak on 3 sessions on writing to try to again recruit. So I told my wife, I said, all I'm going to do is create more questions than I got time to answer. So he asked me a year ahead of time. Well, during that year, I wrote that book, because that way I told the folks that came to the session, I said, listen, I'm going to give you everything I can give you, and whatever I don't have time to, I said, I'm not trying to sell a book, I'm trying to sell a resource that can really help you. And I just told my wife, everything in this book, it took me the first 3 years to figure out in writing, and now they don't have to take 3 years and have that learning curve. They can get the material.
Yeah.
You know, so what'd you mark? Well, I'm curious what parts of
right from an outline.
The single most important piece of advice, and for a preacher, this is right up their alley, because they
and outline. You're stealing my thunder here. I was going to say that.
We don't need
and and I was going to give you the credit for it, because it's in here.
All right, go ahead.
Listen, now every preacher, hopefully, if they're not getting the sermons on the internet or something, and that's another story we can get into.
Well, I think even those are usually outlined.
Yeah, but somebody else did. Anybody that preaches or does Bible studies, you do outlines. You outline your message.
Right.
That's what a book is.
That's what a book is.
And you illustrated that in here.
Yes.
You said here, this is the single most important piece of advice I can give aspiring writers.
Yes. Yes.
Write from an outline.
Yes.
And you explained that in here, and I had it over here. You said the same thing. Again, let me repeat. This is the single most important piece of advice I can give aspiring writers. The main reason I hardly ever deal with the writer's block is that I write from an outline.
Right.
You never sit there and go, what do I write? What do I write?
What's next? Because the outline is like, you know, we were talking about using GPS.
Yeah.
Well, when we used to use maps.
What's a map?
The outline is your atlas. I mean, what I say in the book is this. Sometimes I may get writer's block as far as how to word something or how, but I know what's next.
Yeah.
I know. I don't sit there saying, well, what do I say next? Because, and you know, you think of a preacher, and that's who I'm trying to recruit here. We got a lot of good preachers, and you have done Bible studies that have helped your church. And I mean, you know, every once in a while, I mean, it's all good if it's the Word of God, but you've done a Bible study where all of a sudden God got into it and you're seeing things happen.
Yeah.
Okay, now what are you going to do with it when you get done with it? You're going to save it in a file on your computer or stick it in a drawer.
Yep.
Or you could take that work that's mostly been done and impact how many other people outside of your church. So, yeah.
Let me read a tad from the introduction here. You give a story about the 1851 story about Moby Dick.
Moby Dick.
How great that story was. I won't read all that. That's in the introduction. But then you say there's something. You said, I respect Mr. Melville's storytelling skill. I bow to the genius of his plot. I like your sophisticated writing here, because we don't really talk that way.
Hey, I'm writing a book on writing.
So you
can
gotta-
imagine the pressure?
Folks, this book, this isn't really him. The editor edited this, I guarantee you.
I'm better at writing than speaking. Let's just say.
So I had an editor for the first time on my last book, my 7 Clocks
did?
Ticking book.
Yes.
I don't know if you've looked at that yet. I had an editor for that for the first time ever,
Really?
and she helped me.
Good.
Especially with the first paragraphs of the book.
Good.
Anyway, but you talk about this guy and you said, I will never produce as grand a thesis. His name should be on any list of great fictional masters. But then you said this, but in the most important test of all literature, I know that what I write is superior to what Moby Dick. And you say here, because I have a mightier theme than his.
Yes.
It is a great honor to write for the Lord Jesus Christ. For any Christian author, He, Jesus, is our theme. And you got some more here, but I won't read it all. But that's powerful.
Amen.
And I like this. I got marks all through this book. And we're going to talk about this on Prussian News tomorrow in some interviews. And we won't be quite as nutty out there. They'll throw me out probably. But you got here books that should be written. And you got a verse here. There are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written, every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written. That was John chapter 21. And I thought that was interesting.
Should be written. Didn't say could be written.
Right.
It said should be written. There's a difference.
Now, that's what you said right here. All right. Okay, so, but you've got here, there are books in the Bible. There are books that should be burned. I like that.
That's biblical.
There are some books that should be burned, and they did that in the book of Acts, I think.
Yeah.
And oh, there it is right there. So there are books that should be read,
Yes.
and over here you got there are books that should be written. And you said this: we owe a great debt. We owe a debt to the godly men and women of previous generations who took the time to write. Every generation should read the writings of previous generations. But it should not stop there. Each generation needs to have authors.
Yes.
And
yes.
I wrote here, I wrote in your book here, so I wrote some of my own notes, but
Yes.
my wife and I are compiling a book of poems. I probably shouldn't say this. I'll have 20 people email me, hey, can you do mine? I don't know if I can do yours, but we're putting together a bunch of poems that are later. Now let me say this, and you know
Is
this is
this
true.
what she wrote and you
Right,
wrote?
she wrote. Right,
She
not-
wrote.
Right. These are not anything that we wrote.
That is
And
awesome.
I told her, look, I'll put these together for you. We'll put them in a spiral bound. We're going to print 100 of them,
Good.
and of course she's going to pay for them. But But make sure, I want people to realize, before you call me with your poems are not for the public most of the time. Poems are personal.
You're right.
And, you know, if you don't know the person who wrote the poem, you're not going to understand a lot of what they have in there.
Right.
But if you write poems, they're good for your family, your church, your general area. And, and I explained that to this lady. But Spurgeon wrote a book called Lectures to My Students.
Yes.
Awesome book. Every preacher ought to read it. What if Spurgeon hadn't written anything? My goodness, we wouldn't even know who he is.
Everything he knew would have died with him.
Leonard Ravenhill. Probably one of the greatest books, Why Revival Tarries.
Right.
Gail Riplinger wrote a book called The Language of the King James Bible. She has great big fat books, and they're good, but I've told her, I don't know how many times, I said, your greatest work is that little Language of the King James Bible book. It changed it really helped me.
Man.
And so books are important. And so now let's talk about this real quick, and then we'll get out of here. I wish we could sit here an hour and go through all this. Then you wouldn't have to buy the book. And we got how to choose what to write on. By the way, there's a bunch of stuff about publishing and how to do things. I'm not going to deal with any of that. That's stuff you need to get the book to read. I wanted to give the practical stuff and the why and the how and the why we should write that kind of stuff. But you said here that I became an author by accident.
Yes.
Just take a couple minutes with that.
Tell that story real quickly. This was back in 1997. We were planning a banquet for our young people. I was a youth pastor then, and we wanted to do a banquet where we really encourage our young people in this area of purity and patience, marrying within the will of God. Well, I used to tell this story about one of our bus teams and crossroad experience she had in that area of her life, and I'd use it as a verbal illustration in some of my sermons. And I was telling my wife, at the end of the banquet, I'd like to send something home with them that would encourage them so that they don't just forget. And she said, why don't you take that story that you tell about Lydia, and why don't you just write it out in written form? We can make a handful of copies, and we'll make. So we did. On our computer, then on our table, we hand stapled 30 books, and that's the entire vision I had for it. 30 copies. We had 25 teens come. We had 5 left over, and I gave each one and said, hey, take this home. I had no vision past that for that book. And then people in the church were coming that had seen it and said, could I get some? So we made another batch and another batch. Then it got outside the church, and people are calling it.
I can see that kitchen table with the, because I've done it.
Yeah, you've done it. And finally I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I tell my wife, we don't have time for this. And here, we know nothing about publishing. I said, online, there's got to be somebody that could do this for us. I didn't say a printer, because I didn't know what a printer was. I said, somebody, I can't do this. And we found a little place in Kearnsey, Nebraska called Morris Press, who had this cover as one of their stock covers. Okay, can you imagine my wife going through and looking, and she sees this castle cover, and she shows it to me, and I said, call them and have them guide us through the process. We ordered 200, and I said, that'll put an end to it. Now there are over 200,000 copies.
And I did not know that until last night.
Is that
I didn't
insane?
know you'd done that many of them.
Is that insane? I mean, it's like this thing has a life of its own. And the encouraging thing for the people that's listening is this. You may have some, it's not that big a deal, and you may have this much of a vision. God may take something that you had this much of a vision for and when we get calls almost every day ordering that book, and every once in a while we'll just look over at each other and laugh because it's like this
is a true story. This is the story. Well, half of it's true. Part of it's a fairy tale that explains the story. A girl named Lydia that I know. I don't know her well, but I remember her.
Yes.
She was a bus kid.
Right.
She's now a missionary's wife in Mexico somewhere.
Zacatecas.
And I can't say that word, so it's Mexico. But I think I get an email from them every month.
We're their sending church now, and they have started, I think, 7 churches. And some of the most exciting missionary letters that come in, and we support a lot of missionaries. I can't wait to read the Lemmas. That man and wife.
Michael Lemma was not somebody that everyone looked at. He's going to be a great missionary.
And you know, I find out this is true a lot of it, and I don't want people to take this wrong, but sometimes a guy that has a personality that just doesn't really fit America, there's a reason God made him that way.
Yeah.
And you take that person and put them in a different country, and it is like they were made for it.
I've noticed with missionaries the same thing.
Yes.
They're usually a little different.
Yes, and not necessarily, I just think God, when he formed them in their mother's womb, like Jeremiah, he knew where they would be. And, you know, hey, if you're not fitting in this country, there's other people out there.
Now this book, I've given this to a lot of teenage girls. This is a book about purity.
Yes.
And I would recommend this to every family if you got daughters, granddaughters.
And I got to give a plug. We have finished 3 sequels. I wrote that book 20 years ago. I just wrote a sequel to it called The Warrior Prince, the Prince's Viewpoint. And then that story ended in such a way that I had to tell another story, and then I had to tell another.
And I haven't even seen those yet.
They are at the printer right now. I haven't seen the finished product, but
okay.
Oh my goodness sakes. I can't tell you how excited I am about these 2 sequels.
All right, before we forget,
it's going to be...
This is Jerry Ross, Blessed Hope Baptist Church. He's the pastor. He's been there for 25 years as the pastor.
As assistant pastor and pastor,
okay.
25 years total, yeah.
Now how do people get a copy of the book about writing or any of your books?
They can remember this, which this is the most well-known book. StayInTheCastle.com is our website.
All right.
Or if you Google, you know how to Google it. If you Google Pastor Jerry Ross, you will find us.
If you can't find him, contact me. I'll send you a link for $1. I'll send you a link to his ministry.
Can you tell your wife 10 minutes? Because you know how hungry she probably is out there.
That's why she said she's going to.
She doesn't believe you.
She knows me. She knows 10 minutes. Yeah.
Well, and this is probably a different interview, and it will be fun when we do it tomorrow, because it's not just 2 strangers meeting talking about some subject, but it's a lot of memories. And Brother Dan Goodwin is one of the top shelf guys that I remember in Bible college. And you know, it doesn't take long to figure out who's there for whatever reason. Their pastor sent them, I don't know, and who's there because of God's calling. And
of course, I had been in the Navy 4 years.
Very much
out.
A different, yes. Yeah. The guys that did military and then came to Bible college were on a whole level, different level when it comes to seriousness.
I mean, we chose to go there. We didn't come from our church or from our youth group.
I showed up at 17. I mean, you know, you can imagine.
You were different though.
You didn't know me my first couple years, but now, honestly, I did come, and I got to, again, credit my home church and my dad. And, you know, when I surrendered to preach and showed up there, and there was an influx of young men that came during that time, and buddy, they were dead level serious. We wanted to turn America. We wanted to save America. We wanted to impact the world.
And we were at that Bible college at a special time.
Yes, we were.
I think it was the heyday of the place.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I hate, because I don't want to sound like the old guy that always thinks when he was there. Yeah. But I've had people that were there at different times say, "You guys were there when it was happening."
There was something.
There was something going on. You know.
Do you miss it?
Let's see.
If I
physically went now back and tried to do that, I would die in a week. Okay. Yeah. But
there's a lot of things I would change.
Yeah, let me just, we're smarter now. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of things we just said yes to everything. They said charge through that brick wall. Okay, bam. You know, we did it. You know, but I will say this. What was very unique, it was, you know, 2,500 young people across America gathered one place, and it wasn't a place that you went to if you weren't really serious. Now, there were the 10%ers, there are everywhere, but the vast majority, buddy, I'm going to tell you something, you just are never going to find, that's not a local church, you can't find that. Lay people, and I don't expect that from them. But that many called of God, training, and I mean the vast majority of them heading up into inner city Chicago. I think the story of that entire ministry, when we get to eternity, is going to be what that group of young people, high energy young people, did to bring an element of revival to inner city, and a large inner city that I don't think's been duplicated anywhere quite like that ever. Yeah. It was a good time.
Well, folks,
it was a good time.
You're listening to God's Found Jubilee program. My good friend and Pastor Jerry Ross from Blessed Hope Baptist Church. Find him at stayinthecastle.com. All of his books are there, his ministry. Jasonville, Indiana, that's up near Terre Haute, right?
Yes, yeah.
If you're looking for a place to visit, or if you're on vacation up there, check him out. You'll love his church. I've been there several times. And so we're going to let you go. We're going to go eat. And by the way, when I shut this off, this one's still on. So
Okay.
just a warning, don't jump up and take your shirt off. And folks, we have a good time here. I hope you enjoy the program. So we'll catch you next time.